Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Every Day is Saturday. I'm your host, Brad Gatto. Normally, my co-host, Matt Stahl, who's sitting next to me, is not here with us today, but I do have a guest with us. Jay Organek is here with us from wealth.com. I'll introduce him in just a second. But if you're new to the podcast, welcome. We're excited that you're here. Every Day is Saturday is intended to be kind of a lighthearted financial podcast where we attempt anyway to educate our listeners to help them live the every day is Saturday lifestyle in retirement. And for us, what that means is pretty simple. Friday's a good day. Everybody likes Friday, but you did have to work that day. Sunday's a good day, but you also just are always worried about the fact that you have to work tomorrow. Saturday is that perfect day where there is no work that day, and there's also not work the next day. And so in retirement, we just believe that every day should feel like Saturday. And so welcome to this episode. Like I said, I got a guest here with me today, Jay Organek. Thanks for joining us on the podcast today, man. Excited to have you.
Happy to be here. Really excited to be here.
Well, let's tell everybody why you're here. This episode of the podcast is about estate planning in general, and overall kind of just talking through the biggest frequently asked questions, kind of mistakes people make, but it's also specifically about the company that you work for, wealth.com. So before we get into what wealth.com is, Jay, let's talk about you personally. Why don't you tell us a little bit of your background? Because I know you work at Wealth, obviously, but how did you end up at Wealth, and kind of what do you do for a living and what do you do for Wealth?
Sure. Yeah. So my background is as an estate planning attorney, and been doing that for a number of years now. It's something I've always been passionate about. Even before law school, I worked at a law firm that handled not just estate planning, but also estate administration, and in worst cases, estate litigation as well when things go bad. So I've really seen over an extended period of time the best case scenarios and the worst case scenarios, and it's something I'm really passionate about helping families avoid, and that's been my practice. But as I'm sure,
if you don't mind me asking, Jake, it's not the normal, let's be honest. It's not the norm when people think about being a lawyer, and you have this dream as a kid of being a lawyer in college, deciding you want to be a lawyer. There's a lot of different types of law. Absolutely. I wouldn't assume estate planning is the most glamorous type of law, and it's definitely not what the majority of people choose. So I'm curious, why did you choose this section of law, if you will?
No, that's a great question, because you're absolutely right. I mean, Brad, it's something you see all the time, I'm sure in your job as well, dealing with families. Death isn't something people like to think about, and especially when it comes to those tough decisions around family members. And no, I was not a child who was passionate about death. That's not really what spoke to me. But I did actually have an interest in entertainment law when I was younger, and I'm a musician. I play music. It's been a big part of my life. So that was something that I thought might
music playing, estate planning attorney.
Exactly. Well, that's estate planning.
A lot of those out there. Right? A lot of those out there.
Yeah, no. So that was something I thought might interest me. Although once I started to really study it in law school, I learned pretty quickly that it was a way to pull all of the enjoyment out of music for me when you're just going over contract after contract, and it didn't speak to me in the same way. I wanted music to be music, and law to be law. And so, as I mentioned, before law school, I did actually work at an estate based firm, and so that really was something that I kept coming back to, being really passionate about and wanting to help people with. Yeah,
interesting. So how many years have you been practicing law, and specifically in the estate side?
So practicing law, I'm coming up on my 10th year now. Yeah.
Gotcha. Awesome.
So
let's just deviate for a second from the estate planning stuff. Tell me a little bit more about that music stuff, because you kind of caught me by surprise there. The music playing estate planning attorneys. So I think you said you're in a band, right?
I am actually. Yeah. I still play up from time to time. I still record music with my band. It's been a lot of fun. It's something that I took a bit of a break from in law school, but getting back to it has been something that gives me such an awesome release when it comes time to actually let go, let loose.
So what do you do in the band?
In this band, in my newest band, I play guitar and some vocals as well.
Gotcha. Right. Like, are you acoustic, electric, bass? What kind of guitar are you playing?
It's pretty rock heavy. Definitely electric guitar. I play a little bit of bass as well, but mostly electric guitar.
not only are you in a band, you're a rock band and doing estate law. And not only have you done estate law, but in your past worked on some pretty big, not just wills and trusts, but you're getting into more of the detailed and I don't know how you put that, or the language that you use around like auditing and controversial resolutions and things of that nature.
Sure. Yeah. So estate planning is something that comes up a lot in the context of, financial planning, and it
Yeah.
makes sense. It's a part of that financial plan. But my practice did involve estate litigation as well, and resolving conflicts between, family members, whether through court proceedings or informal settlements, but also IRS controversies as
Yeah.
well, and tax resolutions. So,
Jay,
yeah.
are you trying to tell me that when there's a death in the family, that the kids and family members don't always seem to agree?
Don't
Is that
always
real?
agree on who gets what shares of what and which specific assets. And you would
Oh
be
man.
you would be amazed some of the things I have seen, Brad, with multi-million-dollar estates and people fighting over cutlery. It's there's a lot of emotional, charge behind what goes on in estate settlement. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So then now you work for a company called wealth.com. And so before you tell us what wealth.com is and kind of what you do for them, I just want our listeners to know, I'm really excited about this episode because, as a financial advisor, it's, at least at Fiat, we specialize in kind of the descent, not the ascent. We don't typically help people up the mountain. We have those clients. We help them down the mountain. We're in that kind of that back half of life and really doing a lot of retirement planning, tax planning, estate planning, and everything kind of associated with this idea of now I have to descend the mountain gracefully. And one of the things that we've always struggled with, Jay, is it's one thing to help them figure out what's the right thing to do while you're alive. It's a whole nother thing to help them figure out what to do when they pass away. Not if, right? When. There's not a lot of things that all clients share in common. Death, the eventual end of life, is one of them. And doing that gracefully is it's kind of it's a daunting thought process, number one. So nobody really wants to talk about it. And then when you do start to plan for it, man, can it be super complicated. So when we found wealth, I got into this industry in 2006, which is what, 17 years ago. I've gotten excited quite a few times about things and how we can help clients and value provided and all this other kind of stuff. And but when we found what you guys are doing over at Wealth, it was probably one of the top 5 most excited moments of my financial planning career relative to the value I knew we were going to be able to provide for the families that we work with. And so with that great lead in, Jay, no pressure, tell us what Wealth is, how you ended up there and what you do there.
Totally. So I'll start with how I ended up there. And it's something that I think you highlighted just now, is that there are, when it comes to estate planning in the traditional way, there are so many points of friction that can come up, right? Just even from finding the right attorney you want to work with for your client, to actually getting the client to set up that meeting, to actually having that meeting, to getting the client to follow up, to actually sign the documents. And then, that's not even getting into if anything needs to change. And the last thing a client wants to do when, they buy another home after finally going through that whole process and getting their documents in place, if they go out the next day and buy a vacation home, the last thing they want to do is call their attorney all over again and check if they need to go through the process from the start. And that friction, that is something that was honestly very frustrating in private practice, because the system is what it is and you're working within those reins. But there's not much you can do to really encourage people to reach out, to actually go through that process all over again. So wealth.com is a entirely digital estate planning process. It's a platform for clients or individuals to go through and actually create estate plans through a guided process that also brings in that attorney element when needed to actually have those conversations if someone does need to have those conversations with an attorney. And the fact that we're getting past that friction, the fact that we are getting, increasing access to people who otherwise either might not think they need an estate plan or have hesitancies because of those points of friction, is really exciting to me. And that was something that instantly spoke to me. Talking to the leadership at wealth.com and knowing what the mission was made me want to jump on board as soon as they were getting started.
Okay, so you alluded to essentially what it is. It's a completely digital platform to be able to set up, I would say, the legal side of your estate plan. That could be powers of attorney, that could be healthcare directives, that could be wills, that could be trusts. Is there any documents there that I'm missing? Those are kind of the four big ones, right?
Those are the four big ones. We also do a standalone notification of guardianship as well. Sorry, nomination of guardianship as well. It's an additional document if someone just needs to nominate someone to look after their minor children. It's a stopgap, but that's an option as well.
So I'm gonna attempt to use an analogy here. If as you get to know me over the years, you're gonna realize I get made fun of a lot because I have analogies for everything. But the analogy I think that lands here, and you tell me if I'm wrong, with what wealth is and kind of how it works in conjunction with the families that may want to use it, is this is the way I think about it. Like if you want professional chef food, and you don't really want to pay for all of that, but you want the outcome of that, it would be nice to be able to say, okay, 80% of what you're doing back there in the kitchen, I can do on my own. I don't need to pay you for that, but I just may need you to help me get there. Some of these steps I want to like tap you in on if I need you so that I can get to the same outcome, but to get it done on, I'll DIY what I can DIY. And then I just want you to kind of come in and be the professional when need be. And then I want the guidance along the way. Just set up the guardrails so that I know what I need to get done, give me the right ingredients, make sure that all this stuff is just kind of set up so that I can just kind of perform what I need to perform to get to this meal that I'm trying to create. To me, that's kind of what wealth is, where it's like, look, you don't need an attorney for every step of the process necessarily, right? As long as we give you the guardrails, we ask the right questions, all the questions that need to be asked, because a lot of people just don't know what they don't know. They don't know what should be in there and what shouldn't. And so as long as we give you those parameters and set the parameters for you, ask the right questions for you, that kind of stuff, for the most part, you should be able to get through this on your own without having to pay an attorney. And if we're wrong and there's steps in the process where you need a professional's help, we have attorneys readily available in all 50 states, correct me if I'm wrong, for you to tap into. Is that a fair analogy?
First of all, you would have crushed it on the LSAT. Analogies are a big part of that. If you're ever thinking about law school, by all means, you should really dive right in. But I
didn't know that was on the LSAT. I didn't know that's what it was.
It's a lot of that type of analytical thinking, right? And is this like that? So that's definitely the type of logic that would serve you well.
That's really funny. I was in debate all through high school, and my debate coach always tried to tell my mom I should be an attorney. Never ended up there.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely something you can handle. But
I don't like school that much. That's a lot of school.
The problem, right? It's a lot of school, and then at the end of school, you're really starting from the bottom. So yeah, no, it's not a path that is for everyone. I get that. But no, I think your analogy is really on point. It's definitely something that, and we've worked very hard to build this platform that we have, not just our in-house legal team, but we have worked with attorneys across the country to make sure that every provision is drafted well. And when I say well, is drafted at the level of the top law firms and the top practices in the country, but also is state specific, works, and is not just hitting that bare minimum. I mean, there's, the fear with legal form generation online is, are you just swapping out state names? And hoping for the best? No, we have built these provisions from the ground up with local counsel, boots on the ground in each state to make sure that it's actually good, and fully optimized for that state for practitioner norms, not just statutory requirements. But we have built this platform that then clients, users can go into, and by answering a series of questions, we can, through tens of thousands of permutations of options on the back end of different provisions, pull in and create the document that is actually specific for that client. And that entire process is fully automated without actually ever having to talk to an attorney. That said, we do know our swim lane too. So there are guardrails in place. If a client, hits certain triggers, we can let them know, actually, wait, you might want to have a conversation with an attorney. But luckily, we have relationships with attorneys all over the country, and we're happy to help you set that up. Similarly, if going through the process, if a client ever has a question, they can do the same thing and just actually reach out to us and ask for that. So your analogy really is on point. Yeah.
Jay, you don't know this, but behind the scenes, when we found wealth, one of the things that I did was I sent the link that we have access to, so somebody can set up these documents through Wealth. And we'll talk more about that later.
Yeah.
To an estate planning attorney, a very highly regarded estate planning attorney that works with high net worth families, very close to our office. And I said, hey, I need you to vet this for me and tell me if this is legit or if it's not, whatever, but I want you to walk through it as if you're using this program software to build your own documents. And he sheepishly came back and told me, he's like, this is awesome. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I didn't really find any. He had one small little thing that was specific to kind of his family. He's like, it didn't kind of check this box for me, but to be able to send it to a guy like that and come back with a 99.9%, yeah, this is pretty rock star, very easy to use, that kind of stuff. That was great to hear.
That's no, I love it. I love hearing that. And honestly, as an attorney that has helped build out this entire product, nothing makes me happier than getting attorneys to attack my documents, whether with a red pen or a glowing gold medal. I love the response. And that's hearing what you just described is not inconsistent with a lot of what I've heard. So it's really cool. It's really cool to hear that. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to tease so that people stick around, because what we're going to get to at the end, I'm going to go through some frequently asked questions and common mistakes. But before we do that, we're going to end this podcast after that by telling you what our partnership, what Fiat's partnership with Wealth means, and how we now have the ability, because of the strategic partnership with Wealth, to refer you over there and help you basically take a lot of the hurdles out of your estate planning process, one of which is cost. And so we'll talk more about that, because we have the ability to possibly get you some of this stuff at no cost to your family. So we'll get there. So that's your tease. But before we get there, let's do some frequently asked questions and some common mistakes. And so I'm going to start with the most frequently asked question that I get, Jay, and see what your response is as it relates to estate planning. And that is, how do I know if I need a will or a trust? And when do I kind of tip over into that point of possibly needing a trust instead of just needing a will?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm going to answer that in two parts. And I might be inventing this first part a little bit, just because, in my opinion, it's by far the most commonly asked question, which is kind of embedded into yours, which is, do I really need a will or a trust? Do I really need an estate plan? Obviously, in your line of work, you're familiar with answering that question all the time. But I will just start by saying a lot of people don't realize that the laws in their state, the laws of intestacy, which is the term for default, what happens if you don't have an estate plan in place, the rules are not necessarily what you'd expect, right? So my practice was based out of New York. You ask, 10 people off the street, I guarantee you 8 of them, if you ask them what the actual default laws are without an estate plan, would assume, well, everything would just go to my spouse. So do I really need a will to make that happen?
Right.
First of all, if you are married, you and your spouse should both have an estate plan to decide what happens when you're both gone. I think that's really important. But second of all, if you have children, that's not actually what the default rule is in New York. It actually is a set amount goes to the spouse, but then everything else must get divided between spouse and children. So even if you have minor children, if you don't have a will in place, much less a trust, your assets are going to have to be divided, and a court is going to have to set up a custodial account to actually hold those funds for your children until they're old enough, age majority, old enough to receive them. So right off the bat, there is a massive misconception, and that's not an uncommon rule across the United States. I'm talking about New York, but a lot of jurisdictions are very similar. So right off the bat, yes, you need an estate plan. Especially if you have children, you need an estate plan.
So answer number one is you should have a plan just in general. There's very few cases where that's not necessary. I mean, you said every state is different. We're going to have people that listen to this podcast that are in states that we don't mention, but like we're in the state of Minnesota. And I know, like, as an example, in the state of Minnesota, your state isn't even probated unless you either own a home, or I think it's 75 grand. So if your state is valued over $75,000, or if you own a home, one of those two things triggers, and now you've got a probatable estate. Anything less than that, and it doesn't even probate. But even then, could you make the argument it probably might make sense to have a will, just so that the division of assets, even if there's very little of them, would go the way that you want them to go?
100%. And that's at the end of the day, I think there are two reasons, getting aside from complications like I just described, intestacy laws, there really are two reasons someone might want an estate plan, right? One being actually having a lot of concern over where their specific assets go, whether it's the bulk of their estate, cash, things like that, or maybe family heirlooms, things they care a lot about going to specific people. And that is a motivator for a lot of people, but it's not for everyone. I would say the second big one, though, is making it easy or easier on those that have to clean up after the fact, because even in what you described, that small estate arena, and most jurisdictions have a reasonable small estate. Minnesota 75, New York, I believe, is now $60,000. If you're under that, it's a small estate. But even then, having to go through the process of a small estate administration, you need to get certificates from the court in order to actually carry things out. And if you're nominated in a document, that's just going to be an easier process. So even in that situation, you're just going to make it easier on your loved ones who do have to clean up what's left when you're gone.
So, and I think most people, to get to the second part of that question, most people view a will as kind of the first step in the process. And then if need be, moving into kind of that more complicated world of trust planning. What are kind of the top couple of reasons why you might step from the will into the trust?
Yeah. And I'll answer first of all by saying that is a very state specific question. And there are a few reasons for that. One is probate in general as a concept. That is the process where if you have a will, you do not have a trust, your will describes what you want to happen to your assets when you pass away and who you want to be in charge of certain roles, like executor or personal representative of an estate, of your estate rather, guardian for your children, things like that, are all within a will. But you then still need to take that document to the court. There's a special probate court in every state. Actually, a judge has to review it, has to agree that what you're asking for, you have to petition the court, has to agree that what you're asking for in your petition is consistent with the will. People get a chance to object to the admission of that will to probate, to say, either it doesn't say what the petition says, or I don't agree that was what the testator of the will actually wanted. And after that whole process, which has fees involved with filing, can be expensive if the will is contested, you still have to wait for the judge to actually issue that order. And in many states, that process can take months. In several states, that process can take years to actually get through the probate process. So it depends, state to state. I know Washington, for example, I was recently talking to counsel there who said that the probate process is so easy, it's really not uncommon for people, even in the high net worth space, to just have a will-based plan. In Massachusetts, counsel there has informed me that, and this is a joke, but counsel there has informed me that probate is so bad in that state that not having a will, not telling your client they need a trust, is pretty much legal malpractice. So it really does vary based state to state in terms of that bare minimum level of should I have a will or trust. But getting beyond that, there are always other factors to consider no matter what state you're in. So that same client, let's say, that's in Washington state where probate's not too bad, maybe they have a home in a second state, which is just an additional complicating factor. If they have a home in Washington and a home in California, but they only have a will, they have to go through probate in two states.
Right.
So not only is that an additional lift, but California is a notoriously difficult state to go through probate in. So suddenly, if they just had a revocable trust that held both of those properties, they don't have to go through probate in either state.
Yeah, I think living in Minnesota, we have the extreme example here with Prince, and unfortunately passed away in 2016. It was just last year that his estate was settled. He had no planning done, so he died intestate, right? And they had to go through the whole probate process. And I'm using rounded numbers here, but I think they finally valued his estate around 178 million. About 31 million of that went to fees for settling his estate. The probate process of 6 years. Obviously, the state of Minnesota is not going to do that for free.
Right.
I think about 41 million to taxes. So it was a pretty expensive process, but really important to note. A couple of things I picked up there that I want to make sure that the listeners caught as well. State every state is different. They have different laws, and the answer to the question of what should I have in place is going to vary depending on what your personal life looks like. But on top of that, where you live. The other thing I want to make sure that they picked up on is because I live in the state of Minnesota, and a lot of people here have cabins. I don't know how common that is where you're at, but like I grew up in Iowa, nobody has cabins. And I moved to Minnesota and everybody has cabins, but they're not all in Minnesota. There's a lot of people that have cabins in Wisconsin. And so now if you own this cabin in Wisconsin, to your point, now you have to deal with probate in multiple states. It adds a lot of complexity. And so just another thing to be very cognizant of. So it's a great answer. I'm going to move to the second question. As far as like these commonly asked questions is how often, if I have these documents, how often do they need to be updated, or kind of what are some of the common triggers for me to think I need to change the oil, so to speak, in my estate planning car?
Yeah, no, that's honestly, I think that is a great question, and it's hard to come up with a hard and fast answer on it, honestly. I think every few years it's worth taking a look at what's in there, even if nothing has changed, and maybe thinking about whether or not you want to make any changes, even if there's been no major life circumstance change. Thinking about if maybe the gifts that you've set up don't really make sense. Maybe the people that you've named in specific roles, like trustee or guardian for your children, maybe you've drifted apart a little bit. Maybe your child has a closer relationship with a different family member or family friend that you would rather put in that role. It's always worth thinking about that at least every couple of years. But there are also always major life changes happening, right? No matter what you do in life, things tend to change. Whether it's personal relationships, romantic relationships, people get married, people get divorced, people go through court proceedings relative to those two things. People have children, people have job changes, drastic changes in wealth. Just as you're thinking about, is it time to update my financial plan due to changes like that? You should be thinking about, what should I do with my estate plan? That is something that is a great question that I love, because it's traditionally a thing that's hard for attorneys to tackle, to stay on top of changes from their client's perspective. And just as an example, I mean, we've been talking about it, and I'm in Buffalo, New York, so I'm far up north right now for the country that we're
got
in.
A little bit of snow last winter.
We sure did. We absolutely did. I had family visiting too, and we were locked down for about a solid week. It was a cold one, but it's been a hot summer too, which is nice. Yeah. No, but we have a lot of people around here get the cabin, get the cottage, in another state nearby, maybe ski chalet in Vermont, for example. And by that same token, if an attorney drafts, I'm speaking for myself, honestly, if someone says, I have a very basic estate plan need, can you help me just put a will together? And this is in my private practice, I would say, sure. They would pick up that cabin, not long after, and never let me know. Right. Yeah. And so that's instantly a gap where their estate plan is now, kind of not invalid, but it's ineffective. Right. They now have that ancillary probate in another state, and they're going to go through that issue where it would have been a great time to revisit, have that conversation. And that's something that, not to come back to wealth.com, but that's something that we really do stay on top of and help clients stay on top of, because we have tracking of their assets throughout the platform. It's something that they enable us to help them with, which is really cool.
That's actually a great segue, because I want to make sure that we make that point, because this is one of my favorite parts of what you guys have built, is it doesn't just help create documents up front, but to your point, it helps stay on top of these things.
Yeah.
And so some of that obviously is always going to have to be on the client, because wealth doesn't, any program's not going to know exactly what you're doing day by day, but there's some things that it can help with. Can you talk just briefly about what that looks like with wealth and how it kind of tries to help you stay on top of when things should be updated?
Absolutely. And that's so a nice pillar of wealth.com is that, clients have the ability to use, asset aggregation tools. They can link accounts. They can, include their real property that they own. And we help them see that holistic picture of what their estate looks like by them doing so. So by linking assets and by adding assets, even just household effects that they really cherish to their account,
Yeah.
that they then have that visual as they go through and actually, create their estate plan with us. But the great thing about that is because we have that live feed, we can use that information specifically to help them actually keep their plans optimized. So we have, integrations with companies that can help us see, if massive values, account values change, then maybe it's time to take a look at your plan again. But similarly, if they tell us that they moved, if the client or user tells us that they have moved from, say, New York to Florida, we can instantly, as soon as they update their real property address, congratulate them on their move and let them know that there are changes now that they live in Florida. Florida is their new, residence state. There are changes in Florida law compared to New York law that can actually make their documents significantly more effective for their state. So we're pulling in specific provisions, like say the Florida homestead exemption, that would never be in a New York document, and fully optimizing it instantly for that client just because they updated their address. So
I'm going to go back to an analogy to kind of wrap this one up before we get to more about this, because I want to give you a second to do kind of the top mistakes that you see people make.
Sure.
So I alluded to it earlier on purpose, because this is how I think of it. It's like a car. You buy a car and you have to maintain the car. Once you buy a car, you're not done. You got to put gas in, you got to change oil. And the funny thing about that is, and the other maintenance issues, you go in, it's like, oh, it's a 15,000 mile maintenance. You got to do this, and you got to do this. And most people don't know why they're even doing it. They just know that they're supposed to. And they just kind of take it, at surface level. And they're like, okay, well, just do whatever it is that I'm supposed to do. Cause I want to protect my investment, because I realize that I paid a lot for this thing. And so I want to make sure that it's taken care of. So they just do it. Now with modern technology, your car tells you when it needs help. It says, hey, look, your oil life's getting low. Hey, this is broken. Like, it's got all these abilities to help when things need to be done. And it's crazy to me to think that something as simple as a car, that we have technology that will do some of this reminding for you. Right now, it's not just that little sticker they put up in the upper corner of your windshield saying, hey, come back when you hit 56,000 miles and we'll change oil. Now your car's monitoring all that for you. That it's just now that we have the ability to do that kind of stuff, and something far more important with something like your estate plan, where it's like, look, we're not just going to draft this document for you, have you walk out of our office, maybe to never see you again as the attorneys, when they walk out of the attorney's office, because we don't know how you're living your life. I don't know when things need to be updated. And I mean, I'm painting with a broad brush, so I realize that there's going to be exceptions to this, but generally speaking, these people aren't hearing from these estate planning attorneys a year or two later and saying, hey, stuff has probably changed. You should probably come back in. We should check in on this, that kind of stuff. Usually once it's done, it's done. And it's kind of this set it and forget it mentality. It's like buying a brand new car and investing in that, and then just never doing anything with it, and not taking care of it. Eventually it's going to fall apart. So that said, having a program that will not only help you set these things up, but then just like a car, tell you, hey, we realize some stuff is broken here. Like, you've moved, or your assets changed significantly, or whatever it may be. You should probably take a peek at this and get this updated. I would argue it's about time. It's like, if my car can do this for me to tell me when to change oil, then somebody should be helping me monitor at least proactively. And it's not going to catch everything, but at least some of this blocking and tackling stuff, pick up on this for me, help me stay on top of this, because not only do I not know what I don't know, but frankly, Jay, most of our clients don't want to know.
Yeah.
I don't want to be an expert in this stuff. I don't want to have to care about it. That's what I hired you for.
Right.
So really excited that not only do we have a program that can kind of remove the hurdle of ease of creation of documents, but also start to remove the hurdle of maintaining and updating those documents, and making sure that it's not a one-time, thought process, that it becomes kind of a living document for that family that's updated as their life changes.
I absolutely love that analogy, the car analogy. And I'll tell you why specifically, because you're right. Even for that really enterprising attorney who does, send out an annual email saying, any reason I should probably be on a conversation with you to talk about you giving me another $5,000-$10,000 to update your documents. There's a bit of a salesmanship vibe to it. But two, it's asking again, it's putting it on the client to know what actually is the issue. Whereas the reason I love the car analogy is technology now in the estate planning field gives you that check engine light.
Yeah.
It gives you that something's off here. You might want to fix it. Here's how. So
yeah,
it really is proactive. It's not a sales pitch. It's here's how you make this work again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Let's move into, give me the top 2 common mistakes that you see. Let's start with, just give me one. When it comes to estate planning, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about mistakes people make?
And one, it's the big one we've already discussed, is not having an estate plan, right? Sure. That's the biggest one. But moving past that one. What's that?
Just not doing anything.
Yeah, exactly. Not doing anything at all. That's the biggest mistake you could make.
Yeah.
2 is, I would say it's really easy to think about what you want to happen with your estate, right? What gifts you would give to what people in what proportions. Yep. But I think a really big mistake, and this is coming more truthfully from my litigation background in the estate world, is not thinking through how that might make family members feel, not thinking through the dynamics when you're gone between family members, and that maybe giving someone a bigger share because they've helped out a little bit more, and not explaining that to your family ahead of time, the whys of certain decisions. It's really important to have an estate plan in place, but it's also really important to talk to your family about it. Think about how those dynamics might play out and try to avoid controversies after the fact when it's too late to really think.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If you don't have a second one, that's fine. But is there another before I get there, I guess, let me just pause, because here I'm about ready to run roughshod and just move on to the next one, which is what most people do when they make decisions, and they don't think about the ramifications of those decisions, which is what you just said. And I almost just did it. I'm that guy. I'm the person that says, well, this is what, logically, this is how things should play out. But other people don't understand how your brain is thinking and how you got there logically. And if it was spelled out, it's probably going to avoid a lot of the potential arguments or hurt feelings or whatever it may be. So that is a very good point. And I almost just proved your point by just immediately moving on to the next thing. But point well taken, to not only have the instructions of what is going to happen, but then to leave some explanation of why those are the instructions.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Do you have a second one? Another big mistake that you see?
I did a minute ago. I could come up with big mistakes all day, but I would say I want to expand that last one a little bit, because it's easy to think about it in shares of gifts, but family relationships as well, especially for those with minor children. I'd say it's really important to think about do those children have an excellent relationship with the person you're thinking about leaving them with? Yeah. Do they, communicate well? Are they comfortable around that person? Do your children, do you want your children rather to live together after you're gone? It's pretty easy to think about, well, my son gets along great with my mom and my daughter gets along great with my sister. Maybe that's what I would leave them to, but it's honestly, you have children, you want to think about them growing up with their siblings, actually having a good relationship. I would say that's another big conversation that I've had to have a number of times with clients over the years.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, this has been great. Hopefully we can have future episodes just about estate planning in general. I think it's just a topic that, for obvious reasons, is overlooked in a lot of realms. But that said, what I want to talk to the listeners about is just about wealth and how they might be able to tap into it. Because I'll start by asking you this question, Jay. Is it true that if anybody listening, just themselves went to wealth.com, which is your guys' URL, which one of these days I'm going to make you disclose how much you paid for that URL. I have no idea how you got that. Heck of a website.
Let's call it hard work and luck, but yeah, go on.
Yeah. I'm still going to make you give me numbers sometime. You won't, but I'm going to keep asking. So if they go to wealth.com on their own, can they use your product?
So no, honestly, our product is built specifically for financial advisors. It is from the ground up designed for advisors. It is something that, any financial advisor can set up a relationship with us in order to work directly with clients and make sure that their clients have estate plans. But it is not a direct to consumer product like you've seen out there with some other, I'm not going to say in the estate planning field, but in the broader, legal document creation field. Yeah, this is a specialized high. Yeah.
To be very clear, wealth is a product where you can create the legal documents we talked about before, right? The powers of attorney, healthcare directives, wills, trusts, and also this potential need for guardianship for minor children. But once that account is established, so to speak, or you have a profile at Wealth, not only will it help you create the documents, but if they ever need to be updated in the future, you can update your documents there. In fact, it will have that check engine light for a lot of different things for you, kind of help you monitor these sorts of things. And so it's not just a setup, but it's also a maintenance estate planning tool for these families. But in order to gain access to it, they need to have a relationship with a financial advisor that then has a relationship with Wealth.
Correct. That is correct.
So if the advisor has a relationship with Wealth and they refer that family to wealth.com to set up an account and set up some of these legal documents or use it as an opportunity to maintain the documents that they already have, what is the cost to the consumer to do this?
So that is entirely based on the relationship with the financial advisor. That's something that is the advisor's relationship with their client, and the value add is really handled through that relationship and not through us directly. We work specifically with the advisor on our pricing.
So to be very transparent, and hopefully you're okay with this, because when it comes to fees and expenses and that kind of stuff at Fiat, it's all in front of the curtain. We're not hiding anything. And so the bottom line for us here at Fiat is that with our strategic partnership with Wealth, we pay to have your service. Yeah. And then we pass this value add on to our families at no cost. And so if this is something that you're interested in, if you don't have legal documents in place, if you already do and want them reviewed or possibly maintained or whatever that may look like, and just gaining access to a very, what I would say is an extremely valuable tool like wealth.com, that comes through a strategic relationship with Fiat. And then because of your relationship with Fiat, this is just one of the many tools and one of the many value adds that we have here. It's all just kind of baked into what we do here at Fiat. And so again, I'm super excited about it because it's not our expertise. I'm not a lawyer, right? We don't practice law here at Fiat. There's nobody that can give legal advice here at Fiat, but it is obviously part of the financial plan. And so when you stop and think about being a comprehensive financial advisor and kind of what we're tasked with, I'm going to use another analogy. We're kind of the general contractor, right? And we're the one overseeing the entire project, but we need really, really good subcontractors to step in and do some of this specialty work, whether it's the finished carpentry or the electrical or whatever it may be, because there's just certain things about the home building process you have to get right and you don't want to skimp on. Right. It's like eating sushi. I don't want cheap sushi. If I'm gonna eat sushi, I'm totally paying for it. I'm not going to the all-you-can-eat sushi place.
I think you just had an analogy within an analogy there, and that was awesome.
I did. I told you I'm an analogy guy. So bottom line is, as the general contractor overseeing kind of your overall financial life here at Fiat, it's really important for us to have strategic partnerships. And it's not that we don't have partnerships with individual attorneys as well, and because sometimes that is a necessity, but just having a subcontractor like Wealth in our back pocket and a tool where we can efficiently help the families that we serve set up these legal documents and make sure that they got this part of their estate plan not only completed, but being monitored. I'll just tell you, Jay, it helps me sleep at night. It really does. I'm super excited about what you guys have created. I'm super excited about our strategic partnership with you and the fact that you're going to be able to provide so much value to the families that we're already trying to serve in a meaningful way. And so kudos to you guys for doing what you've done. And I know you're constantly looking at making the tool even better than it already is. In fact, I'm excited about some of the stuff I know you've got coming down the road, which we're not going to allude to today because I don't want to put you on the spot. But Anyway, Jay, it's been a lot of fun having you on the podcast today. I appreciate you being here. Hopefully we can have you back sometime and talk a little bit more about some of these specifics, because I know it would be really valuable to get into like a whole episode just on trusts and like trust planning and different types and just stuff like that. So if you're willing to come back, we'd love to have you. And thanks so much for what you guys are doing over at Wealth. You really are going to make a difference for a lot of people. And hopefully you realize that. And understand that what you guys are doing is extremely valuable to the average person out there trying to take care of their family.
And that's honestly, that is what excites me about work every day, is making that exact difference. Because like I said, I've seen the worst of it, and I love the idea of helping more and more people create the best of it. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, again, Jay, I greatly appreciate you being on this episode of Every Day is Saturday. Thanks for joining us all the way from Buffalo, New York. Again, if you're new to the podcast, thanks for joining us for your first ever episode. We're here to educate you in a meaningful way, and we hope you come back. So that being said, if you have not yet subscribed to our podcast, we would ask you to do so, so you do not miss any future episodes. You can use the subscription button on whatever platform that you found us on, and come back and hang out with us. We'd love to have you. So if you want to learn more about wealth.com, you can reach out to us here at fiatwm.com as our website. All of our contact information is going to be there, whether it's getting a hold of your individual advisor, if you're already a family that works with the firm, or if you're somebody that hasn't, our contact emails, phone numbers, all that kind of stuff is going to be out there. We would love to talk to you about the strategic partnership we have with Wealth and how it might be able to provide value to your family. That said, thank you for joining us for this episode of Every Day is Saturday, and we will see all of you next Saturday.